Say something. If you know something, say something. That is the wording on the billboards going up in Las Vegas. The FBI are putting them up, hoping to piece together more information about how something so awful could have happened, how such a mass shooting affecting so many families could possibly have happened. And I struggled a bit this week. I wrote a talk, and you know how I am? Sometimes I write a talk and then I wake up Sunday morning and it's like gets rewritten. So you may hear a little of what I had planned to say, but if you know something, say something. I know something, and I decided I had to say it this morning. It's time that we come together. It's time that we come together as a people, as a nation, as one brotherhood and sisterhood in this country and end this senseless killing. It is time to put aside the debate. Yes, we have a Second Amendment, and yes, we have the right to bear arms, and yes, that's a good thing. But I don't think our forefathers ever intended for one person to have 23 guns in a hotel room and God knows how many others, fast-powered, hyped up so that they can be not just semi-automatic, but fire like an automatic weapon. I don't think that was ever in the plan. So is this a political speech? No. We talk all year long about our values, and I know that we share those values. We value human life. We value love. We value connection. We value helping one another. And I think that we need to come together to talk about what it is we want. Our founder, Ernest Holmes, talked about, show me a group of people that is for something and against nothing. And I can't remember the rest of the quote, but it was something like, you'll change the world. And that's what we need to do. It's not about arguing. It's not about divisiveness. It's about recognizing our oneness and our shared values and speaking up and acting. And I'm not saying that we act reactively, that we become quiet enough. I think we were called this week to become quiet, to be guided enough to know what is ours to do. But you know what? I think you'd stand with me if I say, enough is enough is enough. I don't want to hear that not just 59 people died. Next time, how many more? Let's not go there. It's interesting, isn't it, that the theme for this month in Centers for Spiritual Living is love as safety. Rather ironic, but how appropriate to talk about love as safety. Not fear, not anger, not stirring up divisiveness, but love as safety. So my title this morning is Undefended Love. It comes from the title of one of the two books of the month I chose, Undefended Love by Jet Saris and Marlena Lyons. And they talk about, ironically, they talk about living wholeheartedly, just as Brene Brown does in the other book we're talking about, The Gifts of Imperfection. But they talk about having an undefended heart. So I think part of what we're called to do this morning is, yes, to celebrate love and to celebrate the joy of knowing the truth of who we are, as Dr. Arlene read from Ernest, our founder. But I think we're also called, if we're having undefended hearts, to feel the pain of what's going on in this country. To feel with the people who lost loved ones, who are mourning them, to feel with those people, 400 some people injured, and the devastation that that's created in that long road to healing. We're called to have an undefended heart, I believe. And it doesn't mean we lose sight of the truth of who we are, that we are love. Indeed, we are. But we can't lose sight of what's ours to do to make sure that we're living, that we're taking action. And yes, we're called to pray for the folks in Las Vegas. But I think the question I want each of us to answer individually this week is, what else are we called to do or to say, to speak? Undefended love. Last week we talked about spirit as our spotter. Just as in the gym when you work out and you're lifting heavy weights, it's a good idea to have a spotter right there next to you to make sure you're safe, to encourage you to, expand and grow and become stronger, but to lift that weight if it becomes too heavy and set it aside on the rack temporarily if that happens. That spirit does that for us, always there, right by our side, right within guiding us and all around us, always there to guide, provide, to keep us safe. And I know that you'll know with me that truth for those people in Las Vegas this morning too, that each of those loved ones who left the planet is indeed safe. And that each of those left behind is indeed spotted right now by Spirit, comforted by that love, comforted by the rest of the country as well as their own families. And we talked last week about how we are called to be spotters for one another, that we pay attention, and that when somebody's load becomes too heavy, we lift it temporarily. Not that we rush in and fix or do for, because we know that each person has the answers within, but that we become good spotters. And the third point I made last week is that when we need help, we're called to ask for it, to ask for a spotter. That it's a myth that we should be self-sufficient. Should we be strong? Of course. But we're not self-sufficient. We're interrelated. We're one family. And it's fine to ask for help when we need it. It gives someone else the opportunity to give. And it keeps that cycle of giving and receiving. So we're kind of conditioned to believe that we can only experience love if someone gives it to us, yes? You know, the whole idea of romantic love, and I'm not knocking it, I think partnership is beautiful and it's how we learn and grow. But the truth is, we don't need anybody to give us love. We are love, as we just sang about. And to think otherwise is what I like to call truth decay. And this culture of ours kind of perpetuates truth decay, yes? That's why we have practitioners, to prevent truth decay. Our founder, Ernest Holmes, said this about this seeking for love outside of ourselves. The wonderful person you are looking for really is the divinity hidden within you. God as you. What you are looking for, you are looking with. Isn't that beautiful? What you're looking for, you are looking with. So we do have these personalities, and they're delightful sometimes and sometimes not. But our personalities are not truly the essence of who we are. We talk about that in Science of Mind. We are each incarnations of that one divine life. There's a wonderful analogy that kind of shows the difference between personality and our essence, our true spiritual core. And it goes something like this. Take a moment, if you will, to imagine 3 figurines. They're on a table in front of you, and they're all made of solid gold. They each weigh the same, about 400 grams, just under 1 pound. One is the figure of a nun, one the figure of a soldier, and one a mother cradling an infant. Now think about it. If you melted these down, they'd have the same weight because they're the same amount of gold. But because of our personalities and our past experiences, we each will have different reactions to those figures. Some might be attracted to the soldier. Some might be repulsed. But it's not the essence that we're reacting to. It's the image, the form. A 20th century Indian holy man named Punja used this analogy to illustrate the difference between our essence and the personality we so often mistake for who we are or who others are. So like pure gold cast into different forms, each of us is fundamentally good, valuable, whole, and that includes the shooter, who was misguided, God bless him, misled, created all kinds of havoc. But the essence is that gold, just like mine, just like yours, just like each of us. I guess part of spotting is remembering that and helping others remember that. And when we talk about, if you know something, say something, I'm thinking, tying into that again, if we see somebody in trouble, somebody must have known something was wrong with that man. I heard someone report that he had been on a downturn emotionally, spiritually, intellectually. We need to say something when we know that's going on for a neighbor. We need to say something. We need to speak up. But when we get lost in identifying ourselves with these personalities, we relate through this complex web of past associations and feelings. Our personalities meet, leaving our hearts untouched. Undefended love. It means we have nothing to prove or to acquire. We are already there. We're already there. We are that which we seek. And how different knowing this can make us feel. Imagine how peaceful, joyful, whole, and how differently knowing that for us and others helps us relate to somebody else. Author Greg Bear talks about real love. He talks about none of us growing up had total unconditional love. Our parents did the best we can. We who have been parents, we did the best we could. But nobody got unconditional love. So we end up having these getting and protecting behaviors, Bear says. I try to get love by being a people pleaser or whatever. Or I try to protect myself by not being open, not being vulnerable. And neither of that really gets us what we want, which is connection and intimacy. So it takes some self-reflection to recognize what our go-to things are, you know? Are we trying desperately to get love? Or are we trying desperately to protect ourselves so we don't get hurt? And how's that working for you? Because then you don't connect, right? So the authors of Undefended Love say, defended personalities get caught in emotional survival strategies. But every time we seek approval, we reinforce the belief that we're not good enough. And every time we look to another to tell us we're not to blame, we deepen our belief that we are at fault. And when we try to blame or change our partners, because that's what we do, isn't it? We blame or try to change the people that we're closest to, we're missing the opportunity to heal ourselves. You know that old expression, when I point the finger at somebody, I've got how many pointing back at me? 3? So to be willing to take a look when our buttons get pushed, what is it in me that needs to be healed here? What is the message I need to learn to grow me, not changing the other person? And we can only have the courage to do this when we remember the gold, when we remember that true essence that each of us is. There's nothing wrong, nothing inherently needing to be fixed or filled in me or anybody around me. Do we need support? Do we need spotters? Of course. But we don't need to be fixed. So the first point I wanted to make this morning is really that we attract love into our lives when we live from our inherent wholeness, from that place of knowing our gold, knowing our worth. Not from neediness or wanting someone to fill us or boost us. This really never works. It sabotages relationships. So intimacy is really about freedom to be who we are. We talked about that last week. We talked about how we're not called to be chameleons, to change our colors depending on what situation we're with or who we're with to try to fit in. We're called to be truly the colorful beings, the unique beings that we are, and to be accepted and known and understood based on that. But that requires us to face our fears. It really does. There's a poem in the book I'd like to read to you that kind of talks about this. It's written by a therapist named Jennifer Wellwood. And she says this, facing our fears. Willing to experience aloneness, I discover connection everywhere. Turning to face my fear, I meet the warrior who lives within. Opening to my loss, I gain the embrace of the universe. Surrendering into emptiness, I find fullness without end. Each condition I flee from pursues me. Each condition I welcome transforms me and becomes itself transformed into its radiant jewel-like essence. I bow to the one who has made it so, who has crafted this master game. To play it is purest delight. To honor its form, true devotion. So beneath our insecurities, beneath our broken dreams, we glimpse this guiding light that's ever there, ever present to take us deeper, where we meet our whole, undamaged, pristine, golden selves. And this allows us to experience powerful levels of intimacy with ourselves, with each other, with our Creator. Undefended love, where we can love and be loved directly and immediately without restriction. The second point I wanted to make is to experience love, we have to be vulnerable. We have to let our hearts become undefended. Remembering that golden essence, being authentic and open, is actually what allows us to be safe. Because when we're pretending or being chameleons, we're never safe because we're always going to feel like a fraud and we're going to be discovered like the fraud we are. But when we can become genuinely, authentically, powerfully, courageously who we are, that is real safety in the world, my friends. I think so. Yes? Now, our egos, of course, have a different idea. And they're going to fight us a bit on this. But our true selves, our higher selves, know the truth. A quote from the book that speaks to this: when we can drop all pretenses and relate with a heart that is undefended, we can finally discover the unmistakable connection we long to have with our authentic selves and with our partners. There's a story in the book about a man with HIV. Actually, it's not a man with HIV. The authors were in an airport. And they saw this couple. Now, the couple was interesting, very different looking. He was kind of brawny, clearly did some kind of physical work for a living. She was very frail, pale. But the interaction they noticed between the couple was lovely. They were attending to one another and touching and flowing, and it was just clear that they had an intimacy that was quite palpable. And they told their story to the authors. They had been in a relationship years previously, and the man was what he called commitment phobic. They loved one another, but he just wasn't having it. And so she broke up with him in search of somebody who could be a committed partner. And unbeknownst to her, she was in a relationship with a man who was HIV positive and had the beginning stages of AIDS. By the time she found out, it was too late. They broke up. And her original lover found her and asked her to marry him. And they said, "Really? You were commitment phobic and all of a sudden you're gonna, And he said he realized what he was missing out on. And now that he perhaps only had a limited amount of time, he didn't want to miss one precious moment with her. And so they connected and had this beautiful relationship. And he said to the authors, it would be a healthy thing for any of us to imagine that we only had a limited amount of time with our loved ones. And then how would you act? How would you be different? What words would you speak? And I think of those people in Las Vegas. How many of them wished they had said when their loved one went out the door that day, "I love you, how much you mean to me." That if we know something, then say something. I think that's one of the most important ways we can adhere to that, is to tell those people, to show those people that we love, that we truly do love them. So remembering that we're vulnerable, then we become available. We lean in and trust the power within us to deliver us to love, as love. And once we're in touch with the presence within, we begin to see the beauty that lives right within us. There are no defenses needed. What would we have to defend when we truly know that? We see with the eyes of spirit. We see with the eyes of love. We align ourselves with our true nature and begin not only to embody love, but experience more love in our relationships, ironically, when we become undefended. So the third point I wanted to make today is that we all long for this greater connection, don't we? We're really here to feel that, to know that, to experience it. We long to do it, and yes, we have to surrender all the external things we do, the busyness, the running, the dancing around, what we really feel. And again, there's a story that's quite a powerful one. It's a Sufi story, the mystic arm of Islam, about moths and the flame. And all of you can kind of picture moths that are attracted to light, outside your door around a candle. So one night the moths gathered together and they were tormented by their longing to unite themselves with the candle. They all said, "We must find someone to give us news of that for which we long so earnestly. We must find someone to give us news of that for which we long so earnestly." One of the moths then went to a castle and saw a light of a candle lit from within. Upon returning, he reported what he saw. But the wise moth said he has no real information to give about the candle. He saw it through a window. Then another moth visited the candle, passed close to the light, drawing near to it and touching the flame with his wings. He too came back and explained something of what union with the candle meant. But the wise moth said to him, "Your explanation is really worth no more than your comrades." A third moth rose up and threw himself with abandon into the candle's flame. As he entered completely into its embrace, his members became glowing red like the flame itself. The wise moth saw from afar that the candle had identified the moth with itself and had given the moth its light. He said, "This moth alone understands that to which he has attained. None other knows it, and this is all." It's kind of a scary thing. But is it being in relationship and being undefended and surrendering? Isn't it scary?
Yeah, well.
Yeah. But we can be lit and we can really, really connect and enjoy and really, really experience that joy of connection. So I think we need to stop trying to conquer or acquire love. This is the activity of our belief in lack. Be willing to see past the personality to our essential self, recognize spirit in ourselves, that golden essence that we all are. See it in our partners, our friends, our family members. This kind of recognition can only reveal love. A love so potent, so safe. It needs no defending. So as we think about how to put this in practice this week, because we always like to be a little practical, I kind of thought of how we could adopt a strategy that I call PI, for prayer and introspection. So first of all, prayer. I mean, that's the first place we go to whenever we have a conflict, whenever we have confusion in our faith, and in really just about any faith I can think of, we go to prayer. But our particular form of prayer, spiritual mind treatment, has 5 steps, and the first 2, I think, are essential. And they're meant to help us remember the golden essence of who we are. So step number 1, step number 1 for the kids, we call it God is. And the second step, we call it I am. So first, step number 1 is recognizing that presence. Recognizing that all-pervading, ever-present, all-powerful, all-knowing presence of love from which we all came, to which we belong for eternity, of which we express for eternity. And we describe it as love and connection and joy and wholeness and so on. And then that second step is unification, like the moth. We talk about how we are one with that power and presence. We can't be separate. We're made of God's stuff. You can't pull one from the other. It's all one. So we are that golden essence. We are the love, the peace, the power, the clarity. That's the truth of who we are. So when we pray, especially those first 2 steps, we're called to remember what we need to remember, even in times when it's hard to know the truth, to really believe the truth. And the second step is the introspection. Now, where are we holding back? Where are we either trying to get love by did you ever know somebody, and probably each of us has done this at some point, where we're giving and generous, but really there's strings attached. We're giving and generous because we want to be loved, we want to be recognized, we feel empty, and we want somebody to say, "Oh, aren't you good?" Or we protect ourselves by being distant or sarcastic or using humor to deflect. There's so many ways that we can defend our hearts. So the introspection is taking a look at, what do I really want? How do I want my relationships with myself, my God, my friends, my family to be? And what can I do to be undefended? What can I do to be open-hearted? What can I do to remember the truth and practice the truth so that I don't have any regrets? Know something. If you know something, say something. Let's go.